Chapter 8. Act 1. After a few hours with Lucian in the garden, I packed my unopened textbooks into my satchel and headed toward my room. I still had chores to do before dinner. As I stepped into the marble entrance hall, I pulled a small, opaque white stone from my pocket and felt for any messages. Sure enough, I got an image of a streaky bathroom mirror accompanied by a feeling of annoyance. I sighed. My adopted older sister Jadith only messaged me when she wanted something. Jadith and I shared a bathroom, and it was my weekend to clean it. I'd never once failed to satisfactorily scrub our shared space, yet Jadith still felt the need to remind me every single time it was my turn. Ugh. Messages like Jadith's were the reason I didn't wear my link. Neurolinks, or links as everyone called them, were palm-sized transmissive stones that conveyed electrochemical messages from one brain to another. Our parents invented them to help people better connect and understand each other. Links recorded neuronal action potentials in the sender's brain and activated the corresponding neurons in the receiver's brain. That meant the receiver could see what the sender saw, hear what they heard, and feel what they felt. Technically, you could send smells and tastes as well, but after a few rotten egg messages from my little brother Izzy, I was wary of accepting any scent messages. To accept a message, the receiver had to have direct skin contact with their link. Some people inlaid their links into bracelets or watches so they could receive messages from recognized contacts the moment they were sent. But I preferred accepting messages periodically. If I had been wearing my link earlier, Jadith's bathroom message would have popped instantly into my mind and ruined a perfectly peaceful afternoon. Using a link took tons of practice. Every brain was unique and processed information differently. Training your brain to translate an outsider's perspective into a recognizable message required patience and experience. I remembered the day Mom and Dad had given us our links. I'd been 13 and Lucian had been 15. Mom advised us to start with simple concepts. Focus on one tangible thing, she instructed Lucian while handing him his stone. Your goal is to get Almira to think about the same thing. Lucian closed his eyes in concentration. His fingers curled around his link, connecting our minds for the first ever time. You're thinking of something brown and sticky, I deciphered, rubbing my new link around my palm. Lucian nodded encouragingly. And you want to eat it? I wrinkled my nose in disgust. Gross! Lucian chuckled, opening his eyes to smile at me. It's really not gross, I promise. He reclosed his eyes, clenching his link tighter in his palm. Keep trying. It had better not be. I shut my eyes as well, forcing myself to focus. As I concentrated on my best friend's message, a flood of ideas began pouring through my consciousness. The palace kitchen, saltiness, bread, grape jelly, satisfaction. Peanut butter? I opened my eyes to meet his. Yep, you got it, Lucian confirmed with a triumphant grin. I let out an amused huff, shaking my head at his self-satisfaction. Really? Peanut butter is the first thing you decided to send me? He shrugged. It's almost lunchtime. My mind's on food. You got something better? You tell me. I grinned and sent him my message. Lucian frowned in concentration as he began to interpret the signals. Your object is sentient? Yep. I grinned. And what else? Lucian's frown deepened as he focused in on my message. It's an animal, he said hesitantly. Bipedal, maybe a chimp. You really like this animal. He makes you laugh. I don't know, is there a favorite cartoon character I missed from your childhood or something? He shook his head in confusion. I honestly have no idea. I had to cover my mouth to keep from snorting with laughter. I was thinking of you, I said between giggles. Well, that's flattering, he said dryly.
Nice to know you think of me as an entertaining monkey.
First of all, chimpanzees are apes, not monkeys. I corrected like the sassy know-it-all I was. Secondly, I was thinking of my witty best friend. You're the one who interpreted my message as a circus chimp. I gave him a friendly nudge with my elbow. Let's try again. 5 years had passed since that first message exchange. In those 5 years, Lucian and I sent thousands, if not millions of messages to each other over our links. We were intimately familiar with each other's cognitive patterns and understood each other's exact intentions without a second thought. I linked with my parents, my 5 other adopted siblings, and some school friends as well. But none of those connections were as clear as the one I shared with Lucian.
Mira!
A happy voice called, pulling me from my memories. I quickly glanced across my chest to check for any incriminating apple puff crumbs. I was clean. Relieved, I looked up to see my oldest brother exiting the West Wing. Anish smiled as he approached. His smile was large and genuine and lit up his entire face. It made me feel like seeing me was the best part of his day. It was impossible to dislike Anish because he so clearly loved everyone around him.
How's life?
He asked. Great, just been chilling in the garden, wondering about tonight's council. I smiled back. Anish had been an only child until I'd arrived. He'd been 8 when Mom and Dad had taken me in. Outside observers had predicted the royal heir would be disinterested at best, hostile at worst about gaining an unexpected baby sister. But those observers didn't know Anish. He turned out to be the most attentive and supportive sibling a 3-year-old with abandonment issues could wish for. Anish had taught me how to ride a bike and throw a baseball. He'd always let me pick which games to play. He'd never complained when Mom suggested he let me tag along with him and his friends. Anish was the perfect older brother. In fact, Anish was just flat-out perfect. The perfect son, the perfect student, the perfect friend, the perfect team leader, the perfect everything. But unfortunately for Anish, perfection isn't relatable. Having a perfect older sibling hadn't bothered me as a kid. In fact, I'd loved it because I could always win the "my older brother is better than your older brother" bragging competitions on the playground. But as a teenager, I realized I would never measure up to Anish. Our parents had always been great about praising effort over outcome, but as I grew older, it became increasingly difficult for me to ignore how Anish's outcomes were always vastly superior to my own. I didn't resent him, per se. He was still the most attentive and supporting sibling an 18-year-old recovering from abandonment issues could wish for, but I didn't seek him out like I used to. Spending time with Anish made me acutely aware of my shortcomings. By the time I was 14, Anish and I rarely did things together anymore. 5 more siblings had joined our family, and I felt more comfortable amongst their imperfections. I still loved Anish, of course. He was my idol. But Lucian was my equal. I could tell Lucian anything without fear of judgment. I knew he felt the same about me. Lucian was smart and funny and exciting, but he wasn't perfect. He got frustrated when things didn't go his way. So did I. He didn't ace every test, and he wasn't the best at everything. Neither was I. Lucian was much more relatable than Anish. I still enjoyed chatting with my oldest brother, though, especially when he had information to share.
Michael and I just finished a meeting with Dad,
Anish said as he reached me at the base of the grand staircase.
He asked me to tell you to stop by his study when you have a chance.
Why didn't Dad just send me a message? I asked, as if Anish understood our parents' quirks any better than I did.
He said I'd be running into you soon.
Anish shrugged.
He tends to be right about those things.
Tends to? Dad was always right about everything. So, you've been talking with Dad, huh? I adjusted the shoulder strap of my book satchel. Did he give you a preview of tonight's meeting?
Not a word.
Anish shook his head.
Whatever grand announcement they're planning has to wait until the whole family is present. All Dad wanted this morning was for Michael and me to report on our cohort's latest project.
Oh, yeah. Izzy told me you and your friends have been practicing biogenesis. I was hoping to coax some information out of Enish. I'd never been in the Genesis lab since they were off limits to younger students. But after seeing a lab assistant shoo a flock of rainbow-colored flamingos out the front entrance when I was 12, I'd been curious about what went on in there.
Yeah, we have,
Enish confirmed enthusiastically.
Mom said it was time for us to start our practical studies. We're trying to form biomolecules using common elements found in hot springs, but it's harder than I thought it would be. Textbooks make it sound so simple and spontaneous.
I had a hard time imagining Enish struggling with anything. Well, you always manage to master whatever you try, so I'm sure you'll get it soon. Enish acknowledged the compliment with a meek smile.
Line upon line, precept upon precept.
He quoted Mom's favorite learning model.
And you're in Unit 6, gravitational physics, right?
Yeah, not my favorite. I ran my hand along the staircase's smooth, polished handrail. But at least when I mess up a simulation, I can toss everything into a black hole and destroy the evidence of my failure. Enish laughed and shook his head.
Your teachers will have a hard time helping you if you always cover up your mistakes.
He gently chided.
Let me know if you ever want to practice, buddy. It would help me to review, too.
I knew Enish well enough to know this wasn't an empty offer. If I even hinted I might want help, he would undoubtedly drop everything to patiently explain stochastic gravitational waves to me. That's the kind of perfect older sibling he was. Enish never lied or made false promises. To be honest, I found it slightly overwhelming. Sure. I beamed a gracious smile, knowing full well I would never take him up on it. Well, I'd better go see what Dad wants. I'll see you at dinner.